JavaScript is notoriously difficult to learn, and I have this suspicion. In fact, I know it from working with so many people over the years that most people have a difficult time with JavaScript because they make it way too conceptual. So, today we're going to build something using an API to actually fetch some data from the web and display it on the page. And we're going to introduce you to a concept called button driven development. This is a really practical way to make conceptual ideas in JavaScript very, very practical and get some hands on keyboard time with one of the most fun ways that you can use JavaScript. This is scientifically proven. This is the most fun way you can use JavaScript. So let's jump right into it. Whether you're following along with me or not, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to introduce you to some concepts in a really, really short, brief video to show you how to do this so you can go about using this to learn any concept that you want to learn. So ignore all these pictures on my screen here, and we're going to make a new folder. And whether you're using Windows or Mac, it doesn't really matter. Just make a folder. So I'm going to make a new folder, and this folder is going to be called Fun with API, right? Doesn't matter at all. And what I'm going to do now is drag this into Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is the code editor that you should be using if you are learning to code. If you're watching this video and you're learning to code, please do not use Cursor or one of these cool AI editors because you're not going to actually learn anything at all by doing that. You'll be a vibe coder, but that's not an employable skill at this. Do I trust the authors of this? Of course, I trust the authors. The author is me. And we're going to set up a couple files here, and I'm going pretty quickly, but don't worry, I will make this available on GitHub for you to check out and use if you want to check it out on your own later on. So we're going to make a new file, and that one's going to be called index.html. And we're going to make another file as well, and that file is going to be called app.js. That's it. Just HTML and JavaScript. And if you're learning JavaScript, hopefully you understand how to declare variables, and you understand some really, really basic things like maybe a for loop. Maybe you're introduced to map or filter or whatever. Or maybe you're trying to learn those things. And what you're doing is you're likely going on Codecademy or maybe Code Wars or some sort of site where you're building these like kind of toy problems that are just conceptual. You're like, well, how does this work in real life? And this is the reason I love to use APIs, because APIs will use most of what you'll need to know as a developer. Working with APIs and the data that is returned from an API will get you a lot of practical experience. So let's make a couple buttons here, and this is part of our button-driven development thing here. So we'll make a button called fetch data. And we're going to copy this and paste another one down here. And we'll make a button called filter data. I don't know, make a button called filter data. I like using this method of quote unquote button driven development because when you think about how you work with the web, it's usually through a form, right? It's something like you'll go to a forum, you'll go to Tinder or Burrito Finder or some weird site where you fill out something and then you click a button and then something happens. Instagram, Twitter, Tinder, I keep bringing up, Airbnb, whatever, right? You type something, you click a button, something happens. Use that same approach when you're building whatever you're building, because that is how the web works. It's not often that you go to a site and it's like, hey, we're using an array of data here. Arrays of data are getting used under the hood. They're not explicitly exposed to you. So let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to that in just a second here. If we have two buttons, and let's make sure this actually works. We have button fetch data and button filter data. Now let's go back into our Finder. We'll go back to Fun with API, and you'll see that index.html is a file that I could open up in Google Chrome. I'm going to open with Google Chrome. I go here. Look, I have two lovely buttons. Now I want to expose my developer tools so I can see what's going on here, and we'll make these a little bigger. Click filter data, click fetch data. Nothing happens. Here's where the fun part comes in. Now I'm going to split my screen right here, and I have app.js. I'm going to drag that to one side, and I have index.html on one side. You don't have to do this. This is just a little easier for me to reason about. I'm going to give this button an ID of fetch, and I'm going to give this button an ID of filter. Why not, right? And now what I want to do, I'm going to write myself a little comment here to tell me what I want to do in plain English. What do I want to do? When a user clicks the button, we fetch some data. This is where things get really fun. So one, const fetch btn equals document dot get element by ID, and that ID is fetch, right? We have a fetch button. So what do we want to have happen? So a user clicks on the button. So we'll say add event listener. What are we listening for? We're listening for a click. And if this is already way past the scope of what you know as a developer and you're learning, one, go to Codecademy and just learn some of this basic stuff. Two, consider joining dev30.xyz. It's the program that I run that's going to teach you way more than you could ever learn through Codecademy and how to actually write code. Get it on GitHub and learn with a community of people. Anyway, enough about that. Button, add event listener, click. When click happens, we have a function, and that function is going to do something. A function is like an execution, like we're going to execute something. We're going to do something. What is that something we're going to do? We're going to get some data from an API. What is an API? Stands for Application Programming Interface. I have a video that's somewhere up around here that I'll go deeper in that if you're interested in how APIs work and how the URL request returns something different than a web page, but that's not super important for you to know right now. You can just think of this as a little bit of black magic in the box right now. We're going to do something called fetch. We're going to programmatically go out to a URL, a universal resource locator, like google.com, for example, is a URL. But this URL is going to return us something very different than a web page. Usually you go to a URL and it returns you a web page, something you can look at. This is going to return you something called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. But you can think of this as simply an array of objects. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you where we're going to get this API from and how we're going to use it in our application here. So you can write window.fetch. We're using this method that's attached to the window. This is a browser method. The window is like literally like the window that you're using when we're in Chrome. So window.fetch, and we're going to go get the API here. So let's find this API, and I'm going to use one that I often use that is free and really easy to use. This one is a fake e-commerce store. So let's do fake e-com store plus API, and we're going to find fake store API here. This is all in the show notes, by the way, so you don't need to memorize this or anything like that. And what we can do is we can just copy. Let's get the products. Let's get a bunch of products that we can show in our thing. You'll often see this used in coding interviews, by the way, too. So we're going to copy this here, and then we're going to jam it back in our code base here in window.fetch, and we're going to say, this is the URL I want you to go to, right? That's the URL I want you to go to. Then. Also, this piece, you can just kind of memorize or copy what I'm doing here. It's not super important to understand, well, what is .then doing and what is this piece doing? Just think of this. We want to get some data, right? We want to get some data. This is the way we're going to get the data. We have a URL. The rest of this is boilerplate. Basically, this is going to be the same as any URL you would use. You're always going to use a URL, and then you're going to do this. And then res. When we get the response back, I'm calling this thing res. We'll do res.json, and then we'll do then the data. So this is like the magic we have to do to get to the data. Then we're going to console log that data. Now, let's click this button and see what happens, because now doing this click should fetch the data, and we will console log the data. We will log it. We will print it in our console in the browser tools, and we'll be able to see this beautiful data. So let's go back here. Let's refresh, and then we're going to click fetch data. And then I think we should see something happen. Let's see what happens when we fetch data. Nothing happens. Why did nothing happen? Because in index.html, we haven't added our script tag here. So let's add a script tag here, and let's do script src equals app.js. And now we should be able to use our JavaScript in our HTML. So we need to have some sort of reference that's saying, hey, wait a second, we need to use that JavaScript. How silly of me to forget that kind of thing. Let's go back here and let's refresh again, and let's click the button. Bingo, now we're in action here. What do you know? We have some data. Now your world has just been expanded by a ton, because now you can use this. You can go out and look for all sorts of APIs now. You can look at ones for like crime reports. You can look for stuff like city data that's publicly available. You can look at ones for Pokemon. You can look at all sorts of cool APIs, explore them, and you can use this same little snippet of code that is right here and just replace this with whatever little URL you want that has an API that's publicly available, and boom, you have a way to access the data. Now, we need to do the next thing, which you can probably guess is, what should we show exactly? We have this array, right? This array of 20 items, and each item is an object, and that object has some properties which we may or may not want to show. Let's do the simplest thing we can do, which is to show the image and show the title, perhaps. So let's show the image and the title for each one of these and make something that looks kind of cool. So this is where good old-fashioned JavaScript comes in. You're working with arrays at this point. This is just working with an array. So what do you do when you have an array? Well, you loop over that array, right? For let I equals 0 such that I is less than data.length I plus plus. This is an array. If you don't know how to work with arrays or write a for loop, shame on you. Go back and learn how to do that. Turn this video off and go learn how to work with a for loop for God's sakes. Come on, man. You're better than that. And the next thing we can do is actually add this to the page. Where do we want to add this? Let's make a little div right here, I guess, and we'll put this div with an ID of the content, I guess, right? So now let's store that. Let's do a const content equals document.getElement by ID content. So now we have an element content, and we're going to jam all of this stuff, all this cool fake store stuff into our content. We're going to do content.inner HTML equals, and then right here, I'm going to do something a little fancy, right? I'm going to do this little funny backtick here. This is not a quote. This is a backtick. The backtick is likely under the escape key on your keyboard here, and you'll press shift and then that key under there, or you'll just press it actually. You don't press anything else. You just press that and you'll have this little backtick. The backtick is a special character here because it will allow us to write JavaScript inside of a string, and it will interpret that as a JavaScript variable. So for example, in here, we'll do something like we'll make a little div maybe, and then we'll have another div to close it off, and we'll have an image, and the source for that image will be this. It'll be data at index I dot, and let's go back to what that data will be here. So it'll be data dot image. So let's give that a shot here. Put data I dot image. Okay, let's see if this works now. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's check it out. Let's try to see if this works. We're going to do fetch data. We're going to first refresh the screen, fetch data, and look at this. Look at this. We have a beautiful page here. And there is one problem, however. It looks like we're just basically just inserting the same image over and over and over and over. Instead of having 20 images, we only have one. That is not what we really want here. So I think we'll need to change this up a little bit here. So instead of content inner HTML just equals this, we'll put plus equals. Basically, we'll just keep adding and adding and adding and adding rather than setting it. We're basically resetting it every time this loop runs. Every time the loop runs, we're saying, hey, you're just going to equal this thing rather than, hey, why don't we just add more onto you each time? So let's save this now, or let's refresh this. Let's fetch the data again. And now we actually have something that looks pretty decent here. So we can go back and we can add maybe like an H1 or something like that. And we'll have an H1. And then in here, do these little, the $ and the two open brackets here, which tells us, hey, we're writing some JavaScript, and we'll put data at index I dot title. I believe it's title. Now we'll go back, refresh, fetch data, and we have something that looks really ugly, but that's okay. And now I hope I've illustrated how you can do something like have a button, go out, fetch some data, and then finally you can use that data to work with things like array methods, or you could do a map. Maybe you could turn this for loop into a map. Next, what I want us to do, just to think about, is how we could make a filter functionality here. Let's pretend somebody was on this site and they don't want to see all 20 items. They want to do something like, I don't know, filter this by items that are, below $15. They want to filter by items that start with F or something like that. So what if we help them to do that? And that's the last thing we'll do before we head out here. We'll put an input right here. We'll put an input, and the type of input will be a text input. And it will be closed off right here. Now you can probably guess what we're going to do. We're going to put an ID. That ID is going to be called text or something. I have terrible names here, by the way. And we're going to follow the same pattern we've had up here. Const, we'll put input, document.getElement by ID, text. Now what we could do here is have the same kind of functionality saying, hey, Add event listener, blah, 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 blah. We'll click, we'll get all the items. Now, what happens when we click on the filter button here? Let's make a filter button. So I'll put filter btn equals document.getElementById by ID filter. Okay. And we'll do this. We'll do filter button dot add event listener. And this will also listen for that click event and have a function as well. And what that function will do is first get the value from the input, and we'll do, okay, const val equals input dot value. And all we'll do now is console.log the val. I always like to have a console log before I go much further because I want to make sure that this actually works. So we'll refresh this. We'll type, ASDF, and we'll type filter data. And what do you know? We get ASDF in here. Great. I think we're off to a decent start here. So we have ASDF. If I type cats and dogs, filter data, we get cats and dogs. Okay. Not bad, right? So how this will work is somebody will first fetch the data, and then you'll type in something like fjall, and we'll filter data. And what would be nice is if we only saw the items that started with F, J, A, L, L. This is a real-world use case of how you might use a filter method on an array to actually filter a real-world data set rather than working on toy problems through code wars or something like that you can be pretty sure you're going to see as an actual software developer rather than some toy problem or something like that. So this is where things get a little bit tricky. How do we go about doing this kind of thing here? Because what we want to do is filter the items by the input. So what do we do in this case? This gets a little tricky here. What would be nice is if we had the const items in an array up here, or actually, let's just do let items equals something like that, and put items equals data. The reason why I want to have items stored up here is that way this function can have access to them. It says, okay, I'm going to get the items and I'm going to store them in this thing here. What about the other people that might want to update the items? What if they want to do something with the items too? Maybe they should get some access to them as well. So what I'll do is I'll have items up here, set it to an empty array, or it can even just be this, to be honest. It can just say let items. Items is nothing. Now items equals data. And then we fill out the page with the data. We say, cool, we'll make a cool page full of data. And then here we can do this. Now let's filter the items out. Now we can do items dot filter, and then we can use the filter function here. Now, if you're not familiar with how this works, is what filter will do is it will take an array and it has a method that it can use on that array to look at every single item in there, run a function on that item, basically execute some sort of logic on that item and determine, hey, should this item be in the array or should it not be in the array, right? So it'll go over every single item and it will return you a new array. And in that new array, it will only keep the items that satisfied the condition in that function. Sounds a little bit complicated, and honestly, I know it can be. This is often a difficult concept for people to get, but I'm just going to show you how I'm going to approach this, and then I highly suggest you make this your own and see if you can figure out different ways to make this work. You can use filter, you could use reduce possibly if you really wanted to. I'd say just try different ways of approaching this problem because the end result should be the same. We only see items that match that condition in our input. We type something in and we filter items that match the names that are in our input. So in this case, items.filter, we're going to pass in a function, and that function is going to run over everything called item. I'm using the word item here as the name of the argument, but we could use something like cats. It doesn't matter. This is simply whatever you want to call this particular argument in the function. In this case, I'm just going to put item because it is the singular of items, which is a fairly common way to name these kind of things. And what I'm going to do here is do this. If item.title includes the value, this is a way to check, hey, does the title include what the person typed? If it does, let's keep it in. If it doesn't, let's not do anything. If it does, return true. Otherwise, return false. I kind of like this. This seems cool to me. And also you don't need to write an else here. This is what's called an early return here. If it includes a thing, we'll return true. Otherwise, we'll just always return false. You can put else or you cannot. Doesn't matter. I'm going to put else because maybe that's a little more readable if you're a little newer to JavaScript, but this is one way to do it. So we say, hey, it includes the thing, true, cool, return true, and that's going to be stored in the new array. And we're going to put const filtered items equals items.filter, blah, 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 blah. And then we can do this. Then we can simply copy this here and we can say, cool, now with the filtered items, what we want to do, we'll put filtered items, and I think this should just work. This should actually just work. So we'll do the click and we'll set the, what we'll also need to do is content.innerHTML. We'll need to like set it to blank at first because we want to like blow away everything on the screen. And then we want to show the filtered items. So let's first like, set the screen to empty and then we'll fill it in. So like, let's just blow away everything that was there and then we'll do all this other stuff. Let's see if this works. I think this is going to work, but let's see. We'll refresh. We'll fetch data. We'll type FJALL and we'll filter data. FJALL. We'll filter data. Okay, not so good. Let's see what the one error is. This is a good way to debug stuff. So it says data is not defined. So we go to app.js. Okay, perfect. So data is not defined here. This is filtered items, filtered items, filtered items, bingo, bango. Let's try this one more time. We'll fetch data and then we'll type FJALL. We'll filter data. What do you know? Look at us. Look at us going here. And we erase it, we get everything back. This is really cool. So let's type in mins, right? Mins. And we'll filter data. And we get back this. And we type in capital EM. We get mins here. Hey, this is not bad at all. We have filtering. We have fetching data. This is actually not a bad little first attempt here. And I hope it makes sense what was going on here. I encourage you to look at this, see if you can figure it out. But even if you can't, this just gives you a really fun way to then begin working with JavaScript, doing things with arrays like map, filter, reduce, and generally finding a practical way to use JavaScript that's not just doing, like I said, a bunch of toy problems. Hope you found that helpful. I'll have the GitHub link up there for you to check out, and then you can use this, extend it, break it, make it your own, and this will be a whole lot more fun working with APIs than following along and watching what somebody has typed. Anyway, see you around. Hope that's helpful.